What a better way to kick off a series on forecasting than by diving into what is one of the most powerful tools in the analyst tool belt, which is a sensitivity analysis. Look, when we're modeling different outcomes, it doesn't matter if you're looking at a budget or an investment opportunity or just a simple reforecast month to month, it's important to take into consideration the impact that all of the individual drivers have on our outcomes. Some people don't take into consideration the idea that one small change in one area might drive an outsized impact in another, and vice versa. So what we need to do is make sure that we understand those drivers so that we can give them their due respect when we're considering what we're building out in our models. And so that's what we're going to be diving into today. I'm going to take a look and we are going to jump right in. Let's do it. All right, here it is in all its glory. We have a revenue forecast. So over here is our output, effectively the model that we're going to be using to drive some of our outputs of our sensitivities once we've got those. And all of this is being driven off of this, our assumptions. And the assumptions are taking a combination of actual information that we know from prior periods and mixing in certain drivers that we ultimately want to test in the model and have a conversation about. And then further, some of these assumptions are driving changes to other assumptions. And those assumptions are to be left alone, and those are colored in black. Anything in blue is an assumption that we're making in this model, and anything shaded is something that we need to actively make a decision around or a determination around where we want to go with it. So I'm going to talk you through this real quick. So first things first, we've got a base price. This is an MRR value, monthly recurring revenue value. This is cost per widget, something like that, right? So we're coming in from last year and we have a base price of $100. Straight, simple, easy to remember, okay? And coming into the year, we are contemplating a 10% price increase. You see here, we've got this name price increase. And then in order to test what we're ultimately doing here, we've just made a decision that we are going to test in increments of 2.5% in either direction of this 10%, okay? Now, the end of year customer count was 1,000, and so you see this over here is a customer roll forward. It says beginning of period customers, BOP customers, in January, it's our starting customer number, and then we're growing or shrinking off of that. Coming down here, we've got our churn assumptions. So base monthly churn from prior year, base churn is 1%. So that's 1% of customers churn every month coming into the year. We expect that for every 2.5% increase in price, that we will see a churn impact of 0.5 percentage point. This is shaded because this is one of those assumptions that we're going to need to test because we want to see how sensitive this assumption actually is. And then what happens is this number, which is ultimately the churn value that's being used over here in the model, is coming from this table down below. This table down below says if for every price change point from 0 to 15%, we expect churn to behave in this way, and we expect new customers to behave in this way. But now I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about new customers. From last year, we were adding new customers at a 2% per month clip. That's pretty good. So we were adding 2% customers, but when we do our price change, we're expecting a 0.25% decrease in that value for every 2.5% increase in price. So based on the price increase that we've got modeled here of 10%, you look it up on this table that says that we're only going to be adding customers at a 1% clip, okay? So that means that's what this number is here. So all of this works together to form the engine to the ultimate financial model. So again, this is linking to our customer start. This is taking that number and rounding to 1 plus the churn rate that we agreed to. Note, anytime that you're dealing with something like customers or units or things like that, those shouldn't have decimal places or fractions. You can't have a fraction of a customer. So you're going to round those. So I'm rounding this to just the nearest number. And so that means that we've got 30 churned and 10 new because this is taking that starting number and multiplying it by 1%, which is our number here. And then you just sum these things up and you get our end of period customers. And then that rolls forward to the next month. That's why this is called a roll forward. And then it just continues throughout the year. We start the year with 1,000. We end the year with 784. This, our cost per widget, or our MRR, whatever you want to call it, MRR base, $100 plus 10%, and that's going to hold through the year. Again, this is assuming that this all takes place on Jan 1. It may or may not be true, and depending on if you're wanting this to be effective January 1, you should probably let customers know ahead of time. It actually might be contractual or by law, depending on your location, so pro tip. Finally, we have our revenue number, and that is very simply taking our end of period customers times our cost per widget, and then that rolls forward to our end of year number. You notice revenue is shrinking in this instance. Clearly, this is an important thing that we need to dive into and make sure that we feel good about our assumptions and that we believe what we are seeing. That is the point of one of these sensitivity models. So let's just jump right in. We need to test a couple of these assumptions and see what happens. So let's do it. Now, a sensitivity analysis is usually going to be built off of a data table. I know this can be confusing for a lot of people. It was for me when I learned about tables in Excel. This is a table, okay? It is formatted as a table. It allows you, it has a table name, it's price increase matrix, and it allows you to have better naming convention, easier to track. It's just overall better for structured data within Excel. It's not the same as a data table. A data table is doing calculations, and a data table sometimes can be kind of hefty in your model. So you want to be very careful when you're using these things. So let's do it. Let's get into it. So here's thing number one. We need to know what we want as an output in the table. And I'm going to go ahead and just say that we want this number. This is our full year revenue number to be our center of attention for this model. This is what we ultimately want as an outcome. So I'm going to come down here and go equals that, enter. That is important because that is now our frame of reference for how this model is going to work. Now, to each their own, everybody's going to have a different way of approaching what I'm about to show you, but really the most important thing is that we decide on the variables very clearly up front that we want to test. So the first thing I want to test is going to be our churn impact. So that is one assumption. And I also just realized that I probably want to move this over just a scooch. There we go. Okay, churn impact. And then the other thing that we want to model is going to be our new impact. The reason I'm choosing churn impact and new impact is because I want to know how this assumption and this assumption are impacting the outcomes of our model. That means if we really believe that every 2.5 percentage points increase in price is going to drive a 0.5 percentage point increase in churn, I want to know how impactful that is, and same thing down here. So now what I like to do is, I don't usually like to go out too far. Some people may disagree with this. I like to keep it to about 5 different 5x5 when I'm doing some of these. So what I usually do is go 1, 2, 3, right in the middle is where I want my starting point. So this is where we're putting kind of a stake in the ground. We have an initial feeling about something. So that is our churn impact. Right now I'm going to start this at 0.005. That's 0.5, Alt HP, Alt H0, Alt H0. So 0.5 point on churn impact. So that is going to go there. And what I want to do is model like in both directions now. A little bit less, a little bit more, just so that we can see a spectrum. So I'm going to take that number and say, well, what if we go minus 0.0025? So that'd be 0.225. And then let's obviously see what 0 is. That's not going to, that'll be interesting. And then on the other end, I'm going to take that and go this plus 0.0025. Boom. So 0.75, copy, paste. And that'll be up to 1%. Alt HP, Alt H0, Alt H0. I want it uniform. And then I'm going to make these centered. Alt HAC, center aligned, bold. There we go. I'm going to make this bold just because I feel like it. And now I want to model up the impact of our new assumption, the new impact. So I'm going to go from here down, down. This is going to be our central point. And I want this to be negative 0.0025. So negative 0.0025, Alt HP, Alt-H0, Alt-H0. I want to fix this format so that it is Alt-H-FN. I want my number to be 0.00%, semicolon, open bracket, 0.00%. I just like to use brackets, not minuses, because sometimes minuses get lost in the mix. It's very obvious here that this is that. I don't like using red text because then it becomes really obnoxious. So somewhere in the middle, this is a little bit more subtle. Now, because we can't move up and down in 0.25 without it becoming really weird here, I'm going to say actually that I want it to be equals this minus 0.1, something like that, 1/10 of a percent, so minus 0.001. And that's going to mean that we go up. Do I want it to go here? Actually, I'm going to make this a plus because I want it to feel more relative. And I'm going to take this, copy Alt-EST, copy that format, copy, paste. So there we go. And now I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I'm just going to paste that here. Now I'm going to move my reference there. Copy that. Oh, but I want it to be a plus, a minus. Bear with me. I'm juggling my brain here. So copy that, paste, paste. Okay. Now we have our spectrums. Now we get to build our table. So what we did was we actually just stratified a range of potential assumptions that we might want to see the impact. And instead of sitting here and keying through each one and making note of the impact, you can do it all in one fell swoop. So that is the power of what we're about to show you. So I'm going to highlight this area that covers the entire matrix, and I'm going to go to Data, What If Analysis, Data Table. And then from here, the row input. Now, this is a pain in the butt. It's like a USB. You're going to get it wrong more times than not. So this is the way that I like to remember it. The row input cell, I would think, would be the inputs that are done in rows. No, 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 no. It is the input that is expressed in a single row. So this top one, this is a row, is our churn impact. So the input cell to this table is this guy. That is the number that we are wanting to stratify and see the impact through this model. The column input is the one that is stratified in a column, and that is this number. And notice we don't have to do anything for what we want in the middle because that's referenced in the top right hand or top left hand corner here. Now we just hit OK, and you get a bunch of numbers. So real quickly, I'm going to do a little bit of formatting to make this a little bit more digestible, so bear with me. I'm going to highlight this, go bold. I'm going to highlight this, Alt-HK, Alt-H9, Alt-H9. I'm going to use a conditional format here using color scales like that. And just because, I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it white so it doesn't stand out. I'm going to make this bold, Alt-HMC. This is the only time generally that I would ever say that go ahead, Godspeed, do merge and center, because there's not, to my knowledge, a better alternative for horizontal centering across area. So this is a place where I would do this. I'm going to go ahead and change this to rotate up. I'm going to move to the right and to the middle. There we go. Now I'm going to take this one and I'm going to make this centered across selection, Alt-HFN. We're going to go to alignment down here, center across selection, boom. Okay, so now what we have, it just more clearly shows our churn impact assumption, our new impact assumption, and the stratification of outputs at these input levels. Real quick way to test, the intersection of our midpoints should be our outcome, this 1165, there it is, 11605. Okay, so this sensitivity is working. Now is the fun part. Like, that was all fun, well and good, but now what do you do with this, right? What is this telling us? This is the value of the sensitivity table, because you don't want to just take this and send it to somebody. You want to take it, you want to digest it, and you want to think through what are the implications of what I'm about to show somebody. So it may come out as you look at this that you think, well, gee golly, there's about a $400,000 fluctuation in these assumptions from end to end. And just for fun, let's just say, like, what if the directive in this world is that we need to hit $1.5 million in revenue. Well, we're pretty far off, and even on the top end where there's no churn and there's next to no impact in new customers, we're not hitting it. So it could be that we need to take a look at this and go, well, geez, we need to change our price increase. So what happens if we do that? So I'm going to go ahead and change this to a 15%, and boom. Notice everything updates, not just our model, but our sensitivity here. And hey, we're getting a little bit closer. But again, this is on the extreme end of our assumptions. So now it's like, oh gosh, does it make any sense that we would ever go higher on a price increase than 15%? Feels pretty aggressive, right? Well, maybe we need to either reconsider where we're going, look to different initiatives than just pure price, or figure out how well we can influence these numbers so that we can feel good about the decision that we're making. Because the way that this is modeled right now, we're at $1.1 million, right? That's a far cry from 1.5 if that's the goal. We're losing customers. Like, this is intended to be a conversation piece. And I think I'm sitting here just talking to myself, looking at this. This is all made up data. I just made this thing up. And I've got so many questions, so many ideas, things that I want to poke at. And that's the beauty of this. That is what this is supposed to do, right? Is make you think and make you realize just how sensitive some of these things are. Like, if you just pick, let's just say that we feel really good about this impact. We think that new customers are in fact going to go down by 1/4 point for every 2.5%. That's a lot, right? Well, then that means that from this end to this end, we've got a almost $400,000 difference in revenue if we are 1% off on the impact to churn. That's pretty dramatic, right? And then same thing goes here. What if we hit our churn impact top to bottom? It's about a 160, call it $170,000 impact. So that tells me that this new assumption is slightly less sensitive than this one. But that makes sense because the iteration here, we're iterating on 1/4% versus a 1/2%. So naturally, it's going to have a bigger impact. A double impact basically is what we're seeing. So what do we do with this? Where do we go from here? I think it's time to call in the experts, quite frankly. And this is another area where I think a lot of analysts think that they're supposed to have all the answers. You can get a project like this where you feel as though it's your responsibility to come up with the pricing strategy or to make some big determination, and you present this with your findings and say, look, this tells me that we need to go in and assume that churn is going to have no impact and that new customers are only going to go down by a bit. That's going to get you laughed out of the room. No, what you want to do is you want to take this, sit down with whoever the decision makers are that hopefully know that you're doing this thing. Maybe it's the CEO, maybe it's the CRO, maybe it's all of those people, and you get them in the room and you play with this model. You talk through what it means. You are not going to be the one making this decision. Nobody is in isolation. The important thing about an analysis like this is that it elicits conversation. It gets more people engaged. It gives them something to look at, something to touch and feel and play with so that you can make the best decision going forward. What may happen is you may look at this with everybody on your team and they may say, oh gosh, I believe this, or we have data that suggests that this number's right and that this number might be a little aggressive. We can detune this, but we're still not at our number. So what do we do to mitigate that churn impact? Maybe we need to take these 1,000 customers and get a little bit more precise. What are the different customer segments? Maybe we need to look at this one differently from this one. Maybe this cost per widget, this base price, maybe that's an average, and we have some customers paying $500 a month, some customers paying $50 a month. That's a big difference, and a 10% increase could mean more or less over here or over here. Everyone's going to react differently. The intention for this is not to answer questions. It's to elicit more questions so that you can have smarter conversations and ultimately iterate until you arrive at a place where everyone is comfortable. Let's back away. Let's back away. This is the punchline here. Good data, good analyses drive good questions, and good questions drive better analyses, and that just kicks off the flywheel of what makes this field so exciting and fun. A lot of times people think as an analyst or as somebody who is in a financial role or an analytics role, they think that they're supposed to present these solutions, and they're often some ivory tower, and they come down and everyone is just going to applaud them and take their information and make smarter decisions. It's not how it works in the real world. And that's not a bad thing. If what you produce elicits conversation, if what you produce is being consumed, people are going to have questions. Don't get defensive. Savor it. Desire it. Like, want more of it, because that is the lifeblood of your job. If you're bored or if you don't have enough work, that's on you. Because in your job, even a modicum of curiosity should get you to dive into something that then you share with someone, that then gets them interested and gets them asking questions. And once that spark hits, there is no going back. You will be overrun with people wanting your attention, wanting your brain, wanting your skills to help them dive into certain things. And every one of those things is going to snowball, snowball, snowball. And suddenly you need to hire. You need to build a team around you. Like, that's the way that this works. And that's the beauty of it. It's not a if you build it, they will come. It's a if you share it, they will ask. And you need to be willing to go where those questions go. Help people on their journey. You are the guide. You are the guide to helping them get where they need to go. And this kind of an example is great. It's a cool thing that you can build. There's technical components of this, but I want you to take a step back from the technical and really think through the exercise that you're being asked to achieve, and who needs to be involved. What kind of questions are they going to ask? How can you prep this in the best way to get in front of those audiences and get the most value exchange in place so that you can just make it better and better and ultimately come to a place where decisions are made that everyone feels good about. And here's the sad reality. You can ask 15 analysts to create a forecast and you're going to get 15 different answers. And the only sure thing about all of them is that they will be wrong. Forecasts aren't about accuracy as much as they are about precision, and there is nuance there. The precision is in our ability to understand and demonstrate some level of control or mastery over specific drivers of our business. How well can you or the managers or executives of your company actually control the drivers? Can they even? And how much do you need to be comfortable knowing that this number is going to be off to some degree, one up or down, and it may have nothing to do with anything that we've done. But the idea that you can at least plant the seed and see the elasticity, the sensitivity around certain things helps at least keep in mind what could happen and put fences around it so that you feel good about certain unknowns, and then do everything in your power to see how well you actually can control those outcomes. And with that, this conversation is exactly why I wanted to kick off this series on forecasting, because sensitivities are just the beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg, but it's like the essence of everything that goes into a good forecast. It puts it all into one thing where you have to be very thoughtful and intentional and open with the assumptions that are being made, the drivers that are being used, and ultimately the outcomes that you're aiming for. And it puts it all into a nice little package worthy of conversation. So hope you got some value. There's a lot more where that came from. Thanks for watching.